Hello, I'm Kelly O'Connell, attorney and author with Knockout Podcasts. I crave debate on politics, society, history, the arts, religion, and red-hot current dramas. Hang out with me and my intriguing guests while we examine our times. Hear my take and offer me yours. And please don't forget to subscribe. Well, hello, folks. Kelly here. Kelly O'Connell Radio, KO Knockout Radio. And today's show is about the hallmarks of leftism, which is poor to no planning on all these major projects. And I specifically want to talk about Biden and the situation on the border and how they just opened the floodgates and act shocked and astounded that all these people showed up. I'm going to tie this into Chairman Mao. Now, don't forget that Chairman Mao was listed by a couple of people in the Obama administration, including Anita Dunn, as being her favorite philosopher. She couldn't really explain why. But anyway, here's a little opening monologue for you. The history of the world is littered with failed experiments already disastrously tried and kicked to the curb. And now here we are again with the border hemorrhaging illegals coming in at such high numbers that the government itself cannot even pass out paperwork for court dates. They don't have time to. So, number one, you're telling the entire world that U.S. citizenship is so worthless everyone gets it instantly. Yet, more fascinatingly, the Biden administration seems to be aping the works of Chairman Mao, who, don't forget, killed 40 million people in the Great Leap Forward in farm collectivization, and then later admitted he didn't have any idea how it was supposed to work. And that's the theme here. The theme is doing things that you're not prepared for because you don't really understand what's going on. All you understand is the ideology. You got me on that? So both Biden and Mao toiled to break down society so that a new phoenix can arise. A socialist phoenix. You get me? Burn it down and something will come out of the ashes. Except sometimes there is only death and collapse. And I want to throw this idea out there for you folks. There is something in leftism, Marxism, progressivism, socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, that is kind of mystical. It's this idea, as long as we believe in these facts, in these Marxist socialist facts, and we follow through on it with some plans, it's kind of going to magically work out. But it doesn't work out. And I could show you time and time again in history where there was no magic phoenix that jumped out of the ashes. It was just one death after another. And they say that, and this is a guy that studied it at University of Hawaii. R.J. Rummel had the world's center on studying communist deaths by communism. And Mao killed 77 million, at least. Probably more than any other person in the world. And a lot of it was because he didn't really have a plan for what he was doing. And so that's what I'm talking about. Marxism, the Communist Manifesto, it presents the problem. The problem is capitalism. The problem is having businesses. But it doesn't really have an answer. It just shows you the problem. And the answer that Lenin and Mao and Karl Marx and his writing partner Engels came up with was a lot worse than capitalism ever was. So, on his first day, Biden, it changes 5 rules of the Trump administration, and Trump had stuff down to kind of a science. I think he had less than 50,000 people trying to get in a month. And it was because there was a stay in Mexico policy, and people also understood that if they came here, they weren't just going to be let in. I mean, what other country ever has done that? And so you have to assume that the Democrats want or need this disaster. Now, why would that be? Knowing that the border is open, And by the way, Biden said today that, or maybe it was yesterday, that the border is a disaster. Now, think about this. He changed 5 rules, 5 laws, 5 policies of the Trump administration. If he really wanted to deal with it, he'd just change them back, right? He doesn't want that. The Democrats don't want that. They want all these people coming in there, and they say it's quite likely that we'll get 2 million new immigrants in here. And then if Biden gives them instant citizenship, then you've got 2 million more, which is a lot of votes. You got 2 million more Democratic voters. So, generally speaking, first I want to go over the screw-ups that have occurred since Biden got in. And Biden has been in, this is the 4th month, about halfway through, a little more than, 2/3 of the way through. He comes in on January 6th. So you got 3 weeks there. And then you got 2 months. That's 60 days. That's like 81. We're around 100 days right now. He screwed up the border. I mean, it's an absolute joke. You've got people being dropped off in towns, illegals, where the illegals dropped off have a higher population than the people in the town. They're being shipped across the United States. 10% of them have COVID, and yet we've been told by the Biden that we're supposed to have a new mask mandate, and that Texas didn't have any right of opening and stopping up the shutdowns. How can you have those two ideas together? That's cognitive dissonance. It is a crazy time to be alive. All right, number 1 is the border. Number 2 is petroleum. They immediately shut off access to federal lands in some way or the other, federal stuff, but they shut down the Keystone Pipeline that was going to bring in 850 barrels of oil a day. And now gas is skyrocketing after the disaster in the ice storm in Texas. So gas is up like 30%, and it's going to go higher. The Iran deal, number 3. We're going back to this failed deal where the Iranians were given hundreds of millions of dollars. Number 1 state-sponsored terrorist country in the world, and they went out and immediately started buying terrorist weapons and training people and giving money. Probably Americans, but no doubt Westerners were killed when Obama did that. You remember when that plane flew in there and there were hundreds of millions of dollars in the hold? China, we're bowing down to China. Trump had stood up to China. Now we refuse to stand up to them, and they're licking their chops. Deficit spending, $3 trillion in deficit spending this year is going to lead to hyperinflation, and that's what they want. Break down the currency so the government has to come in. Taxes, they want to supersize taxes. Now, don't forget the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve says up to a certain point, the more you cut taxes, the more money comes in as tax revenue because people are encouraged to work harder. But they're doing the opposite. Cancel culture. They've embraced cancel culture. Biden told Georgia that they had no right to pass their new law, even though it's not unconstitutional. And who jumped on it? Major League Baseball, Coca-Cola, Levi's, Delta Airlines, all jumped on this to attack Georgia. That's crazy. There's a vote war going on where the federal government's trying to take over state voting. And there's a fight there, and this is part of it with Georgia. Media immolation. The media has told so many lies for so long that people don't want to pay attention to it anymore. But who's going to watch, these rich and famous and powerful people? We can't trust anybody now. And number 10, rule of law and Justice Department implosion. We can't trust the Justice Department. We can't trust the FBI because they didn't take care of the leakers and the bad cops when they went after Trump. So now the rule of law is falling apart. And we understand that there's 2 rules of law. There's one set of rules for liberals, another one for conservatives. It is a complete disaster. So folks, what do you think we should do about it? And if you're not a Democrat, if you're not a liberal, you may not be a conservative, you may have no interest in Donald Trump, you might hate his guts, but you're in the crosshairs. You are in the crosshairs. Now, let me tell you just a little bit about Chairman Mao, and I had written an article about this a number of years ago, and it is pretty interesting. I haven't read it for a long time, but I've got it right back here, and this was an article called "Who Was Chairman Mao Lionized by Obama's White House?" So I explained, first of all, that Obama, his administration claimed that Chairman Mao was a favorite political philosopher, which I thought was crazy. So that's why I wrote this article. Chairman Mao was in charge for 27 years. Mao Zedong, as Chairman Mao was born to middle-class peasant family in a small town in 1893 in Shaoshan, Hunan province. He's a disobedient kid, disrespectful, a natural rebel, but also a mama's boy. He hated his father, which is common amongst many dictators. And he said one time, people like me only have a duty to ourselves. We have no duty to other people. Now, don't forget that Marxists do not accept that there's a soul. They do not accept that humans have any inherent goodness or quality or worth, only if they can be used by the government. So he didn't accept any external moral order, but he became a person who shattered his country to try to rebuild it into socialism. But he was a complete whack job. And so when he got into power, he got help through the communists from Russia, and he began to study them. He probably already was. He was a person who read a lot of books, and as a matter of fact, one of the books that he read was The Wealth of Nations, so he did understand capitalism. So one of the things that he wanted to do when he got into power was he wanted to increase the harvest 100-fold, which is a crazy goal, right? So he collectivized the farms, and what I was telling you earlier, he didn't understand because Marx himself didn't understand. He understood that there was a need to get rid of private property and do everything together, but he didn't understand how it would work. Now, it doesn't work, and the reason why, and I'll tell you right now, is when Lenin tried to put in communism, he was a true believer that it was the largest drop of GDP in recorded history, and so he had to get rid of it. And that's one of the angers that these communist leaders have towards capitalism, is that it works and socialism doesn't work, even though socialism is supposed to be not selfish and capitalism is selfish. So let me just tell you about some of the crazy things that he did. In trying to industrialize China, he ordered multiple canal and lake excavation projects, but using very primitive means. A lot of times the people were out there digging with their hands, which caused the death of many peasants. And most of these projects were failed or abandoned because he didn't have a central design. He just said, let's go out in this area and we'll build these canals and we'll build these lakes. But he didn't have, to grow properly, a community or a country even has to have a national plan. It has to be detailed. And remember, we put the highway system together on a national plan that was ordered by what's his name, the famous general, U.S. general, who was president. He had this strange plan called getting rid of the 4 pests: rats, sparrows, flies, and mosquitoes, right? But the peasants went out there with brooms and started killing all these critters. But it was at that point they discovered the sparrow pests were actually one of the biggest fighters against the flies and mosquitoes. So then pestilence broke out as flies and mosquitoes actually just blossomed, and many people died from that. He also had a program called Make Steel. And this is how crazy Chairman Mao was. He didn't understand industrialization. He didn't understand planning, right? 40 million people died. They starved to death or they got sick from lack of food. And so he basically was ordering a Make Steel program, and he got 90 million peasants to melt down any metal available, including farm implements. He bragged that China's output would excel Britain in 3 years and America in 10. Instead, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of implements were destroyed. Heaps of brittle, useless pig iron resulted. All right? So that's how this guy's brain, he's like a little kid. All right, so then he's gonna super produce grain, right? On the superpowers program is what he called it, and he cut the food levels to Chinese peasants down to half of what they needed to eat for subsistence, and then even less. And Lenin also went after the kulaks. He killed his own farmers. He killed millions of those. How can you have successful agriculture if you're killing millions of people? But anyway, both of them did this. Food was confiscated by force. Many farmers died of starvation, and many also committed suicide. And this is what Mao said. This is a war on food producers as well as food consumers. I'm comparing the stupidity and the lack of planning of Chairman Mao to Biden and his. They do things and they don't care if there is a disaster. They laugh at it. So 700 Chinese peasants into communes, right? He would make commune after commune. And then according to Jasper Becker, who wrote Hungry Ghost, Mao's Secret Famine, 33 to 40 million people died during the forced famine. It didn't have to happen. All right, so then it's a total disaster, and everybody blames Mao. Everybody secretly blames Mao, and this pissed him off. So then he goes after the elite, the intelligentsia. He goes after the people in his own party in the Cultural Revolution and kills 10 more million people. So here's a guy that believed that he picked it up from Hegel, the philosopher Hegel. He picked it up from Lenin and Stalin. Mao says, we love sailing on a sea of upheavals. To go from life to death is to experience the greatest upheaval. Isn't it magnificent? So, and Heraclitus. But when there were murders, when there was executions, Mao was a psychopath. He felt a kind of ecstasy he never experienced. This is a quote. He never experienced it before. It is wonderful. It is wonderful. Asked how to confront critics, he said, we'll slit their ankle tendons and cut off their ears. So he only saw destruction as the way to reformation. He said, talking about destroying the country and rebuilding it, this applies to the country, to the nation, and to mankind. The destruction of the universe is the same. People like me long for its destruction because when the old universe is destroyed, a new universe will be formed. Isn't that better? So here's a guy that was actually nuts, and he had this country for, 27 years? And then you've got, I'm not aware of anything good that Chairman Mao ever did. He killed a lot of people, he killed tens of millions, 77 million. How is it that Obama or anybody in his administration was following Mao as a hero? All right, so then I sum up 5 pillars of Marxist political philosophy. And this is what he believed. Number one, that any tactic that achieves a desired result is acceptable regardless of the cost. 2, individual people are irrelevant. Only the group has any standing. Human deaths mean nothing. 3, a strong central government must be erected. 4, non-socialist states must be shattered to be remade along Marxist lines. And 5, there is no God. No set of rules exist above society, including any civil or human rights. So, in a nutshell, that's how they destroyed China, and it's a miracle they survived at all. But, this is what's going on here right now. Maybe and not on the same level, but there's just a lot of craziness going on. And, the question, excuse me, that I have for you is, what can we do? We've got this cancel culture out there. And the problem isn't just the cancel culture. It's that you've got people that are absolutely afraid to stand up and say anything. There's a real spirit of cowardice in America. And so we've got to find some leadership here where people will stand up against the cancel culture. They'll stand up against the politicians, And so think about this. When Biden allows 200,000 immigrants a month, 10% of those are infected, right? That's 20,000 cases a month, 250,000 cases a year. Now, how can you say you're stopping COVID, when you're shipping across America 250,000 people who have COVID? And here's the real problem, too, is those people who have COVID are getting put together so closely that they're all going to get it. So you could have easily 1 million cases of COVID that are being pushed across America. How is Biden fighting against COVID? How do people allow him to stand up there and say that he's against COVID, and he attacks Texas for getting rid of the shutdowns, and then he does this? Here's another thing. He claims to love immigrants. And, they know that they were taking 3-year-old kids and throwing them over 20-foot fences like a piece of garbage. And those kids because the government said we're going to take in kids without parents. So it encouraged the worst kind of behavior. It encouraged these kids to be sent up here, and there were beatings, rapes, starvation, prostitution, and murder with these kids. Now, also, we were told that they hate riots, that a riot is something that a conservative does at the Capitol, and yet for a year they supported riots and arson and beatings and murder, and they don't have a problem with that. So there is some sort of a crazy thing that's going on. And I would say, if you want to talk about cancel culture, Trump is the one. He's the one who was canceled. He's the one who every single thing that he did, he was attacked. The media got up and lied about him. And they tried to get people to hate him, and people ended up hating his guts. A lot of them did. But if it wasn't for Trump and his program to come up with the COVID vaccine, we would still be sitting in our houses. So Trump has been the hero of all this. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about, and this is from AMAC, Government Watch, 4 Democratic debacles in 4 weeks, and this is from a week ago. So 4 disasters that have struck Biden. His poll numbers have fallen. They're in free fall. And what does he look like? He looks like Skeletor. He doesn't have any gums. Folks, he doesn't have any gums. What human being doesn't have gums? He can barely walk. How many people do you know on a flight of stairs trip 3 times on the same stair? So his disapproval rating has gone up 12 points from 30% to 42%. He's not having a honeymoon. And the leftist media attacking Ron DeSantis, who's really come across as a genius in how he's taking care of Florida. He never shut it down. All the kids are in school, and people are moving there by the hundreds of thousands, probably every month. It's unbelievable. I went there. And so 60 Minutes gets up and lies about him, and they when they're smoked out, they refuse to apologize because they are there. And this is what CNN said. CNN said that off the record, a guy thought he was on a date. He told the woman that the purpose of CNN when Trump was in office was to destroy his reputation to get him out of office. And they're still doing that. And now they're protecting Biden. So here's another problem. Number 3. These hypocrites in America are attacking Georgia because they changed the law to make it harder to cheat on votes. But do they care about China, how they treat people, how they don't have any real voting over there? Of course not. I mean, it's all hypocrisy. Now, the Democrats are getting, number 4, are getting very, very worried. Very worried. And even Charlie Cook said it is going to be a slaughter at the House of Representatives. So what if they lost 40 or 50 House seats? Then the Democrats would never get anything else passed. And what if the Republicans come back and take the Senate? Now, here's the question of all questions. Will Trump get up? Will he run again? Will he go and win? Is it possible? Wouldn't that be incredible? It's absolutely possible at this point. It's the worst job of governing that I've ever seen. And it's smug, you know. Kamala Harris was given the job of helping at the border, has never gone to the border, but she flew to Honduras and other places like that. Now, they want to bring 4 more justices into the Supreme Court, 4 very liberal justices, so they never lose again, but they put that off for about 6 months, but they talked about it. So Washington Post, of all papers, said there doesn't appear to be any end in sight going back to the border. And, you know, there's 2 theories of government. Is that, number 1, the government is working for the people. It represents the people. It tries to help the people in a transparent manner. It helps the people, and it is reactionary, or it's reactive to the people. It takes an interest in people's opinions. Now, the other theory is that leadership, government, is meant for the elites, for the smart people, for the Ivy Leaguers to be put into power so that they can dominate the plebs or the peasants or the regular citizens as we have in America. So I have never seen good government come out of the second theory. And going back to the kind of the beginning of the left and right fight, it's all the way back to the Enlightenment, which was the period of time a couple of 100 years ago, 18th century, 1700s, when science became established and the idea of doing things by study and by, you know, by the scientific method and such. It was an attack on religion. Now, the people who wanted the kings to stay in place, those people were opposed to the Protestant refugees. And the Protestant refugees were chased out of Europe because they wanted reform in the church. And the church, the leaders, the kings, the leadership didn't want that in England. They didn't want that in France or the Netherlands at various times. And so these refugees relocated, and if you want to read about this, it's in some books called The Radical Enlightenment by a guy by the name of Israel who's written. It's really interesting. But the Protestant refugees were the Puritans. They wanted to purify the Church of England, and they were kicked out of England. So they come to America to start a new country. So we are rebels from the very beginning. But what we wanted, as you can imagine, as you know, as you already know, because of your training or your reading or just through logic, they wanted a constitution to protect them from the government, so they got one. They wanted a Bill of Rights for the same reason, so they got one. They wanted Republican government. And what is republicanism? It is not the Republican Party, in the same way that democracy isn't the Democrat Party. Republicanism is the idea of taking power with a foundation of democracy, a foundation of one person, one vote. You build a country in which people are protected against power by institutions. And so we've got all these institutions in the country that the Democrats are currently trying to destroy, many of them. And one of them that is supposed to diffuse power is the Supreme Court, and they want to change that from 9 to 13. But the Congress, the House and the Senate, are diffusions of power. The presidency, it is a separation of powers. You've heard that term before. All right, but you've got all kinds of institutions out there that are helping to make the country safer and to make it easier to survive, because power is diffused, because, as Lord Acton said, that unlimited power is totally corrupting. So what they're doing, the Democratic Party and liberals are trying to do now, and I'm not saying that all Democrats want this, but enough of them do that it's very worrisome. They're trying to do it to destroy the elements of republicanism in the country. And I'm looking up the exact definition here. All right, so here's the Annenberg classroom, and I'm hoping it's not too leftist, but republicanism is a theory of government that emphasizes the participation of citizens for the common good of the community. The responsibilities and duties of citizens are paramount, and the exemplary citizen readily subordinates personal to public interests. In contrast to liberalism, which is concerned primarily with the personal and private rights of individuals. That's interesting. Republicanism stresses the public rights and obligations of citizens to cooperate in support of their communities. So you can find it right there. The problem that we have in the country right now is that too many people have been told the only thing that matters is their rights and not their duties. So liberalism on one side, old liberalism, the old-fashioned liberalism on one side, rights, and then the duties of republicanism on the other. So that's kind of fascinating. Popular sovereignty is the will of the people, and that's what John Locke argued. So civic mindedness, civic duty. So anyway, my question for you, what I'm going to ask you is, how do we fight back? Let's just say most Republicans, and probably a significant minority of Democrats, are opposed to things like getting rid of the border, opening the border just so anybody can come in here, and that the people that come in, they call the shots. We don't call the shots. The idea that we're going to get rid of the filibuster, because the filibuster is supposed to represent minority rights. And minority rights is another idea. America has invented so many ideas, but it was really brought to maturity in this country. And you can't have government mixed in political parties and a society mixed in religious beliefs. You can't have that unless you have some element of minority rights. And in the Senate, it's called the filibuster, the right for the minority party to put pressure on the majority party. Now think about it. The razor thin majority in the Senate, it's 50-50. And they have the one extra vote with Kamala Harris. And the swing in the House is like 3 seats, like six people. 3 people jumped across the aisle. The Democrats would lose their majority. So in a situation where it's just about 50-50 on both sides, they want total control. So how are they going to get it? And one of the ways they're going to get it in their mind is through bringing in extra Supreme Court justices to pack the court. Another one, and this is in the future, is to get new Democrats into the country. How do you do that? Well, I hate to say it, but I mean the most uneducated people are Democrats because, and obviously some of the most brilliant people and highly educated people are Democrats, but which is an oddity because, people that don't speak English, that haven't been to school, that they're not literate, they don't speak English. Those people come in with the idea that Uncle Joe's helping him. They're getting brainwashed into becoming Democrats. And if you drop them off in Texas, if you drop them off in Arizona, if you put them in Florida, and listen, there's a lot of states out there that have a natural abundance or edge of Republicans over Democrats. What they want to do is they want to kill it. They want to, in other words, they can't. So what does this all mean? All this stuff, bad stuff that's happening means that the Democratic Party believes that they don't have the goods to make it on their own. They can't win. They're going to lose power unless they cheat. So bring in 2 million new Democrats, or let's just say half of those people are of the age and will vote. That's still a hell of a lot of votes in a lot of close contests. And I was told that in the swing states with Trump and Biden going against one another, it was a 40,000 vote margin. So it's just a squeaker. And I still don't believe that we're ever going to know who won the election because they never went and looked at all of the stuff that they could have. So you can call me a fool for saying that, but I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see a guy that lives in a basement beating someone who gets 75 or 80 million votes and who's been an extremely active and successful president. It's crazy. So what do you think the future holds? What is your opinion on the Supreme Court? Will they get those justices on there? How long will they keep the fence open? And will anybody pay a price? And don't you think it's illegal for the Biden administration to misuse their power, just open the gates so that, it's like the zombie apocalypse. The gate is busted down. You got all these people staggering around. How is it possible in our country that they can do this for months on end and nobody's able to stop it? There's a problem there. We need a law, right? We need a law that makes it illegal for this type of thing to happen. All right. What's going to happen with the oil industry? Are they going to relent? Are they going to let the Keystone pipeline go through? I mean, it was about 80% done, and it originated up in Canada. So do you think Joe Biden called up and said to Canada, do you mind if we turn this thing off? Well, we know that this guy that runs Canada, Trudeau, is a weenie, and he said that Biden never mentioned anything to me, but that he wasn't going to fight him over it. because he's a weenie. So something's got to happen. And I think that the Democrats are seeing that they are in free fall and that it can't last. And these people like Ocasio, whatever her name, AOC, and these other people, they might come up with a lot of money, but it's not going to do any good because there's so much fury out there. And don't forget Ocasio-Cortez, that she stopped Amazon from coming in. Now, the analysis that I heard has never completely summed up what she did. There was going to be something like, what was it, 100,000 jobs? It was going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. It would have been ultimately billions of dollars in income and taxes, because there was just a lot of high-paying jobs. She stopped it and was so proud of herself, and she said, it just goes to show you what one person can do if they really try. She's keeping jobs, and it was in Queen City, I think, was going to be the Queenstown, whatever it was. I used to have a friend that lived there. And so this girl stops hundreds of thousands of people from having a better life. She's proud of herself, and she wins the next election because leftism is so crazy that they reward the worst people in their party. Well, anyway, thanks for tuning in. Wanted to get into a few things, and don't forget to leave some comments on it. It's Kelly O'Connell, and the sponsor of the show, Sam Kane, and Sam Kane, attorney at law. He does personal injury, and I'm going to have him on here so that we can do a little interview with him and find out whether or not you have a good case. But have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Ciao. Well, thanks for listening in. Tune in tomorrow for a new podcast on a sizzling topic, or download one of my classics. Be blessed. Catch you soon, Kelly and the gang at Knockout Podcast.